in a very, very lucky position today because we, as you know, we've been doing architecture as part of our art topic this term, and we are very, very lucky to invite visitor. This is Mr. Subharthi Guha, is that how you pronounce your name? And he's travelled down from London today, particularly to talk to you. So he works for a particular architect firm that he's going to tell you more about in a moment. And we are very, very lucky because he has come here with his own good nature and time, because he learned that you were learning about a particular artist in your topic this term, and he's come to talk to you more about that artist, as well as architecture in general, and what architecture can look like as a creative job. Okay, so please make sure you are showing him excellent eye contact throughout. You're going to have time to ask some questions at the end of the session, and then we are going to go back upstairs in about half an hour to 40 minutes. Okay? Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. How many of you are interested in architecture? Oh, that's a huge number. Okay, that's quite a lot. So I'm going to be talking to you mainly about art in architecture. So if you're interested in art and you like architecture, this might be interesting. And that's how I started. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story as well, how I started. And then we're going to look at maybe one or two buildings and how it's built. And then finally, we will talk a little bit about what are the bigger potentials of architecture, maybe city planning, you know. So that's me. I work at a firm in London called Subharthi Architects, and I worked previously in South Korea. I have also a small practice of my own, and I teach. So the transition for me from art to architecture happened when I was a little bit maybe older, like 12 years old, similar age as you, and I was getting a few awards in art at the time, so I was quite young, and that's the time I started thinking about architecture. And what was the reason was that I really liked art, and this is one of Van Gogh's paintings. But I think art changed a little bit. You see, it was more enclosed in canvases or maybe on walls, etc., unlike the Renaissance when it used to be in a much larger scale. So I was looking for a bigger canvas than the painted canvas. And that led me to the building on the right, which I finished in 2015, is something that I aspired to do. But this is a sketch from about a week ago. I was sitting, I had a new project, I did a sketch, and then what interested me from art to architecture, that the idea that you can take something intangible, which is on paper, and create a spatial form, which then can be habitable. So that was the interesting part for me, and it's still, I feel, always very excited when I think about doing it, starting of the project. And therefore, let's talk a little bit about architecture, what it really is. I mean, for me, it's mainly an idea. But if you look at the universe, as we know, is filled with a lot of chaos. It's got big bangs, and then on the other side of the universe, it's filled with a lot of silence, very darkness. So in between the two, we have our planet, and which has got a higher level of order. So you got these elements, but the planet has got higher levels of order and complexity. And within that complexity, architecture tries to find in us that stability and comfort, that element of the fixation of space in time. So that is why we go and travel around the world, wanting to see the Eiffel Tower, wanting to see, the Big Ben. So that's why we want to go, because it gives that stability in a universe with a lot of chaos. So that's why when animals were starting to build shelters, and these were different forms of architecture, and they were doing it, and humans were doing it as well, but they were very temporary. So from that temporary, they looked for permanence, and that is the Greek architecture, which is a kind of a replication of the trees and the branches, and you can see them here, that how they kind of built. So they kind of replicated it in stone so they could find permanence. So, and in order to do so, we graduated from Stonehenge, and they were built for different purposes. So the permanence evolved in something like an icon, the pyramids as a belief system, as the spectators in the Colosseum, for someone's shrine, for churches, for anything you could imagine. We wanted to seek that permanence through architecture. So it created a presence in time. So when I started with the idea of a search of a potential new architecture, and that was always very exciting. What could be the next thing? What could be the next design you could build? And which led me to a building that I worked on with Charles Correa many years ago, about in 2006, and in 2007 we designed it, and it finished in 2010, very short period. But it was very interesting because as an architect, you design, you help build it, but then finally what you build is no longer yours. So you have to move to the next one and the next one. So it's a very kind of a progressive profession where you keep changing, your ideas keep changing, you keep changing as you grow. And so one building to the other changes. So now we'll talk a little bit about how artists have moved to architecture. So on the left-hand side is a Piet Mondrian building, art piece, and on the right-hand side is Rickfield, who designed the Shorter House. But you can see the relationship of the colors, the proportions, and they were working at the same time, inspired from each other. And they moved from what was a 2D sketch organization to a three-dimensional space. Similarly, you have an example of the Cubist from Le Corbusier, who was inspired a lot from, to the left is Picasso, and in the center is one of Corbusier's paintings, because he was inspired from it, which then translated into buildings. So there's a very close relationship, as you are learning in your classes, between art and architecture. So, and similarly here, you see this is a painting of the Russian constructivist Malevich. And thereafter, that is his tectonic, when he was trying to push his art into architecture. And on the right-hand side is Zahavi's thesis, which took that tectonic building and created an art piece first. And from these art pieces, this was one of the first buildings we completed in the office, which is the Vitra fire station. So this is the artwork which helped us to think of spaces differently. And then from there, we managed to build a building after many years. And then the art exploration continued. And therefore, that brings us to some of the works that we produced as buildings. So this is an art museum in Chicago. This is a museum in Rome, Maxi. This one is in Glasgow in the UK, which is a transport museum that you have seen. This is in Ganzo. So now you can see that the art is kind of changing into a very much digital world, and these are kind of surfaces and all that help the digital, let's say, computation has helped us simulate as well. So this is the Ganzo Opera House. There's a bridge, habitable bridge in Spain. That's an entry to a metro station done in the early 2000s. This is a BMW factory. So we even designed a factory. And the interesting thing about this factory is that the blue collar and the white collar, that means the people who build the cars and the people who sit in the offices, they share the same space. So it was a very nice entwining of the two. Then of course, maybe some of you may have seen it when you've been to London. It's the Aquatic Center for the Olympics that we designed. It had two modes. You had the Olympic mode, and then the capacity was reduced to the legacy mode, and that's some of the images. We've also built on top of existing buildings. This is in Antwerp, where you had an existing old building, and we built on top of it as an extension of offices and public spaces. And there's a nice party space in the middle, so you can go and look down. This one is in Hyde Park. We designed this for the Serpentine Pavilion, which is a restaurant that is attached to the exhibition space. This is one of the projects I worked in Melbourne. This is a housing. And of course, we have built, recently finished the Daxian Airport, which is one of the largest airports in the world in Beijing. And those are the interior views of the airport, so you know the planes come, some of you have flown.
Is that in Qatar?
Which one?
From that airport.
Is that a?
Was that in Qatar?
No, this is in China, in Beijing.
Okay.
Daxian Airport. It's the largest in the world, opened in 2019. So, these are some of, let's say, the kind of nice images of different buildings we've done. But I'm going to show you quickly how the building is developed a little bit as well. So we're going to talk about two of them. One is a tower. So that is our building. There were three architects selected. The one in the center is Libeskind, on the right is Isozaki, on the left was us. And I just wanted to show you that some of these forms are developed very complexly through computation, through computers, and they're rationalized. And I can show you a quick video. You can see here that how the points, the elements of mathematics come in as well into design. And that is what separates a lot from art to architecture, is because to make something tangible and buildable. So now you see the kind of equating the floor plates and how they kind of stack up. And then you will see the facade, the subdivisions, then of course there's cost, and there is economy, and you want to rationalize, you want to fit into the budget of the client. So there's lots and lots of, let's say, hard work that goes into it with engineers, together with specialists who help you. And obviously the client who finances it. So you can see the floor slabs, and then you'll see the facades coming up. So there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of, let's say, studies that you have to do, redo, and adjust while you're designing. And more often than not, these constraints that come with it, they make the design better than it was. Provided you are intent, as an architect, that's your job, to make sure that as things and constraints come in, you don't lose the beauty of the design. So you must push for it. So you see the floor slabs and now the facades coming up. So there's the first layer of facade, and then there's the second layer of facade that comes in, and this is the capping, and then you'll see the second layer. So it's a double facade where the air comes in and goes out. It's well ventilated. And it reduces heat and energy. So that's the last layer, and then I'll move on to the facade, and then I'll move on to the next slide. So that's the building finished. So the idea of the twist was there was an axis, and then you come and arrive in the axis, and you see this axis kind of go and disappear into the sky. So that was the idea. Obviously, there's other tall buildings. This one we are doing in Macau at the moment. It's two hotels, a casino, a water park, and it's under construction at the moment as we speak. And now we're going to look at another building, which is more horizontal, which is more like a school. It's rectangular and longer, and we won the competition. So sometimes we enter competition. We won the competition for this. And here is some of the. So we create these renderings first. So first you look at these renderings to see what the image of the building is going to look like. On the right-hand side is a detailed, complex, three-dimensional model that fits in all your services, your engineering, everything together. And you analyze it and you make sure nothing is sticking out, and everything is tidied up. And then you produce these renders, and then this is an image on site at the moment in construction. I'll talk a little bit, so that was the work at Zardi. I will talk a little bit about the work that I have done personally as well. And it's a similar logic. So I also started with doing some of the artworks. So these are some of the artworks that I generated first that would then give rise to a staircase like this within a house. And And this is another building of mine which got some awards, but here you see the artwork is actually in the center of the building. And you might wonder where the doors are to enter this building. But it's there somewhere, they're hidden. So, where art becomes a centerpiece of also the architecture itself. And these are, so this is the whole site, and it's under construction. So you see over there, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but here in the center, no, but yeah. So that's the temple, and that's the building that you see here, and then this building is here, and so it's a big site. And a lot of work is going on, even for 10, 12 years now. So some of these projects take really long, yes? Some of these projects take very long. But there's always this idea of trying to build in some passive cooling. So obviously we do air conditioning, but there's also other ways, yeah, in a hot day like this, that you could have windows open at the bottom, and the air naturally cools out from the top, and that's why the chimney is there. So it's modern building, but using very traditional techniques. So here is another building that I will show you, which we have done, and this shows a little bit about, if this works. I'll stop talking.
For constant exploration in nature, studying the continuity of the scales and the complexity of the surfaces, translating such forms into buildings is a challenge. Higher computation can make it simpler to analyze and construct around the world. Forms with structures that are proud to reveal themselves, forms that create new building spaces.
So that was a short video to show you how, you take an inspiration such as the leaf, you make models, you do the computation, and finally you build on site. And it takes time, and this is some of the pictures of construction, and some of the pictures of the build on site. It's a roof terrace. Again, what you're missing here is you're used to seeing windows have certain standards, but they don't exist in these kind of buildings. But then the design also goes a bit deeper. So we start doing designs of the menus. We start doing designs of the logo. So you just want to make everything as one experience. And obviously we do a lot of competitions. This is a train station in South Korea, it's an international competition where all kind of architects participate, and there's one winner. Unfortunately, we were third in this one. We didn't win, but it was a good test. Then this is a current project of mine that's coming up it's a resort, and it uses the traditional wind catches, which also has this air coming in because of the natural flow. It's in the desert climate, and then you have a natural flow of air going out, and then you have a swimming pool. It's a large project, and then a restaurant. And there are some other views of a canopy, for example. This one was inspired from one of Stephen Hawking's book. This is a canopy of the night sky of the vortex. There's another one here, which is a museum that we did. This was a proposal for the UK in a conference center. And now I'm going to talk about a minute or so about what is possibilities of going beyond buildings. So at the office at Zavadi, we were also studying about cities and how art, and some of the art composition that was studied with the explosion of cities, and also parametrically driven, computationally driven models of cities, which led us to doing a master plan in Singapore called the One North Master Plan. And also now we're doing one in Tallinn, which is in Estonia, which looks like that. So you can do master plans, and I personally have been doing a little bit of research, and we entered the competition for about 154 square kilometers master plan in China, in Lishui, and we got the creative prize for this. But this is a composition of what the master plan looks like, and how large the scale is. So you can always go beyond the scale of a building and into a much, much larger scale if you want to, and if that is of interest. So, thank you very much for listening. I'll keep it short, and I will now take some questions.
Right, you get 5. This is an opportunity now to think about anything
Yes.
that you've seen that you like.
Your name first and then the question.
Grace. And
Grace.
what's the prize for like the competitions? Why do you answer them?
What's the prize for competition?
Yeah, why do you?
Yes, so competitions, the first prize obviously is to build the project. You get to build it. There are also some financial prizes, second prize, third prize, you get some money, etc. to cover your expenses. So that's it. But the first prize is what everyone wants, is to build the project. Yes?
What's your most
Name?
Kaysen, and what's the most expensive build that you've architected?
Expensive.
Yeah.
Oh, it's very relative because prices keep changing. So 2 years ago, steel prices have increased now 40%. So now any building you build will be most expensive. But I think the value for me is more important. So the value of a building, which is not financially dependent, it's dependent on the quality of the building. So if you build a good building, it will stay, people will want to preserve it for 100 years, 200 years. They will make amendments to it and want to keep it. But if you don't do a good building, it might just come down in 20 years. So, for me, I think I would focus a bit more on the value because money always keeps changing. Okay. Help me out. How do you do that?
Let's have Ronnie.
Can you speak out? Why don't you stand up and say it out?
A bit louder for Ronnie.
How long does it take you to build something?
How long? So there is a different time limit for different buildings. Some buildings here have taken 15 years. Some buildings can be done in 2-3 years. The construction time is not very long. But you must remember that architects and architecture is dependent on politics, on money, on contractors who sometimes go bust. So they take, the process itself, the construction process itself today doesn't take more than 2 to 3 years, no matter how big a building it is. But it's the rest of it, the economy, cash flow, politics, etc., that takes a long time. So it's all very varying. And sometimes the client also changes their mind in the middle. They want something today and they want to change it after 5 years. So you have to adjust. Okay,
Josh.
What was the time of the longest architecture?
what was the?
How long was your longest architecture?
Mine personally,
Yeah, and also I've been to the transport museum 10 times.
sorry,
I've been to the transport museum 10 times.
10 times.
Yeah, I'm half Scottish.
Oh, do you like it?
It's getting boring.
It's getting boring. Okay. Okay, the first time was okay then. Okay. Okay, me personally is one of the temple projects that I showed. I've been working on it for the past 14 years. But because there are too many buildings, and we finish one, then we start another, then we do that, and so it takes time. But other projects come up very quick, like the canopy you saw, the video with the leaf, that was done in 2 years from start to finish. So, sometimes it can be very quick. But it is a bit of a patient game. So that's a bit of a difference between art and architecture, because art you can select the time and when you want to finish it. But in architecture you're dependent on a lot of people. It's not under your control.
Darcy, is this news to me?
Yes. Columns, yeah.
Do you have a question about it, or did you just want to say? You're just saying.
It was designed by SOM. The firm is called an American firm called SOM.
Ceci, right at the back. You need to be loud voice.
Have you ever failed a project?
Sorry?
Have you ever failed a project?
Failed? What do you mean by failed?
Like, your plan didn't work.
All the time. You are always fighting as an architect to keep your design, but I wouldn't say fail completely. You fail in parts. Sometimes even if you think it's the best thing to do, There may not be enough money to do it. The client may not like it. The committee may not approve it. So, or engineers may not back you. So you would certainly, you have to get used to little failures to achieve the bigger goal. Good question.
Do you move around the world to build different buildings, or do you just make the design center?
We do both. We move around the world for some projects to oversee. We also sometimes stay here and then hire a local architect there who would take care of it. But sometimes we still have to visit. So yeah, sometimes it involves travel when a firm like Saadi who does buildings all around the world.
Mario.
What's your favorite
Favorite architecture. So I think I like all of them, but then I don't like them as well because it's already done. So I'm always personally, I mean, you can ask different architects their favorite buildings, but me personally, I'm always looking for the next excitement. So the picture that you see is only done a week ago, and that's what I want to put on top because that's what I'm now excited about. So always keep the excitement alive, and then you have a long career.
Right, so let's just take a few more. Sydney.
How many architects do you building?
Depends on the scale of the building. So if I say that it takes 200 people to complete a building, which includes contractors, engineers, clients, architects, I would say the proportion in that 200 of architects would be 5 to 10 if it takes 200 people. Because the design component is the initial phase, but then, if you have a large project, like you have a team of 40 people, sometimes when we're doing a city planning project, like we're doing in most of the buildings, you can go up to 70 people as architects only. And that is just from our design side, and obviously there's a local architect, they would have another 100. So you could land up with 200 architects in certain times of the design. But then you can also reduce. So it's not constant. It goes from concept, which is small, to detailed design, which is big team, and then it goes down to construction, which is small team.
Cool, should we do 2 more? Beatrice.
What's the most popular building? That is not in your control. That is not in an architect's control. The most popular building tend to be what gets advertised most by other people. So Olympics, big advertisement, popular. Schools, not that popular. Towers, very popular because you can see them all the time from a distance. So yeah, it just, you don't know. And sometimes, and popular is also dependent on different parts of the world, what people think is important for them. There's a very excited hand there. You can try. Go on. Hardest building. Hardest building. I think a lot of them have been very challenging because you see all these buildings are very different from each other. So there's no particular rule. I mean, there's a process, but there's no particular rule how we build them. So every one of them becomes very challenging to meet. For example, the tower that you saw, it was very challenging because we wanted to make it as economic as possible. So, and it became really cheap in the end because we found a way to bend glass. So yeah, it's a process and they get very tough. So in every project there are very tough moments where you have to take very difficult decisions. Money versus look versus convincing people, which battles to fight with the client, which not, So there's always very challenging moments. The initial design bit is the nice bit.
you want to do one more, and then we'll finish up because we're at that point of time. You have sat magnificently during this, and we've had a very hot day. I'm very, very impressed with how we have sat and listened. I think what we might do is, because so many of you have got questions, is we'll try and collect some of those questions, and we can send them to Subharthi, and he might be able to respond to some of them at another time. So let's do one more. Later, you've been sitting beautifully.
What was the longest architecture you've done?
Longest architecture?
Yeah.
I think I already answered that one.
Yeah. It's about 14 years, I think it was, mate, was that project. So last one, Catherine, I think.
Sorry? How old was I? Okay, that's a good question, because when I was in university, I was 18 years old, and in my first holidays, I just wanted to go to and work for somebody. So I decided to. So I was 18 years old. I joined an office, which was a small office. They really didn't want me. I was not going to be productive in the first year. So they asked me to do some drawings for them, like doing a perspective sketch. So that's what I did. At 18 years. But then immediately when I did it, the client liked it, so they took me to site to see the building. So that was our.
Super. Right, thank you very much indeed. For this time, we need to say a massive thank you. We also need to say thank you to Amrita. Amrita is the parent of the child at Brookland's Farm who introduced us to Subharthi and invited him along here today. So can we both give them a round of applause and a big thank you?